to jump off from, and specifically for you, Tyler, because I know you've really dug into the audits that have come out about Mauna Kea's management. And so just, reading audits is so exciting for so many of us, but they are really useful documents. I mean, we do learn a lot. So what have you learned from your exploration with that and your understanding of those documents? Speaking on, what Heather's brought up with this learning and what the telescopes have learned.
Yeah, so I think, the most memorable audit is the 1998 state audit of the stewardship of Mauna Kea. And I guess from, going through it, the main thing is basically that there was an imbalance of the way that the University of Hawaii was allocating their resources and time. They were developing this mountain with the telescopes, and particularly the main concern was there wasn't enough protection on the cultural sites. There was other issues that was, I don't want to say minor, but those were I would say the biggest things was the culture site protection, the natural resource protection, just wasn't as high as a priority. But then since then, the following audits, from there, University of Hawaii focused on putting in the structure and the management plans to take care of these places, and now the audit, the plans was just recommendations for the administrative rules needs to get done, and that currently got finished. And from there on, it seems like I think it's already been held to like the highest standard of all public lands, and now it's and it should be. This is a very special place to all of us, whether you're native Hawaiian or you just like it pristine. This place should be at the highest standard, and that's exactly what they're striving to do, and that's what the audits show. You can look at their yearly internal audits or their every 4 or 5 year state audit. But yeah.
Heather, is that your feeling on how the mountain has been managed as somebody who lives here, does astronomy? I mean, you're talking about, trash being thrown to the side, and I've heard numerous times from the protesters, they even made a funny video about it, how about the telescopes throw trash around, the telescopes are defunct, and that's why 5 of them should be taken down, they're not doing anything. Do you feel like that is an accurate description, or have the telescopes learned now, like, don't throw your trash on the ground, I mean, clean up after themselves? What's your feeling about the management?
So, I mean, I've never actually worked at the observatory, so I can't say personally from like first-hand experience, like what stuff has been, done. But from people that I know that do and have worked up there, my brother served as an intern for the Keck Observatories as a part of the Akamai internship program. And I remember him talking about, when it snows on the mountain and finally the roads open, choke people like to go up, right? And you have trucks driving people up and down so they can ride their boogie boards down the snow, right? And like we go and fill our trucks up with snow, bring it down, build a snowman on the beach. And he would tell me like how the crew used to talk about how when the snow melted, how much opala used to be on the ground. And who was it that cleaned it up? It was the crew. It was the people that was taking care of the mountain. I think for the most part, it's not like there's McDonald's up there where they're gonna be like driving through and like, I don't know, there's no reason, there's not too many places for them to make rubbish, but I think the things that do cause rubbish are things that come from storms. So I've seen some things get blown off in high winds. I heard about one of the luas getting blown off in the high winds, and I was like, hopefully nobody's in it. But the conditions up there can be extreme, and that can lead to stuff collecting on the ground. From what I know of the staff, that I don't know anyone that would purposefully do that. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely, Mylon.
So I spent 2 summers working at the East Asian Observatory. They manage the James Clerk Maxwell Telescope and the United Kingdom Infrared Telescope. And so I got to spend a lot of time up there, and I got to know the crew of the telescopes very well. And one thing I can say is that they are so extremely mindful of the Mauna. This might sound like a sad little example, but just something I noticed is everyone up there carries a reusable water bottle. Like that doesn't sound like a big thing, but here we are on the podium with plastic ones.
That's just me. That's my bad.
So and even in our weekly meetings, we would discuss the plan for each day, and part of that included the management of getting the waste in the telescope off of the mountain. And you may not think that that's something that really needs to be thought of, but it really is. That has to be done safely and on a very scheduled time too, so that it's not overpiling and somehow getting onto the landscape. And so yes, the observatories are very mindful of how they are leaving a mark on the mountain and doing everything that they can to prevent that mark from actually being extremely damaging. They're doing all that they can to respect the Mauna because they love it just as much as all of us do too. A sad little experience, a personal experience of mine was I had been up on the mountain stargazing, and I sadly saw a group of local boys go, they were kind of being rambunctious and, saying that they needed to use the restroom. And instead of using the provided restrooms at the visitor center, they decided to go off into the wilderness. And I was absolutely dumbfounded. I was very confused. I was like, should I go and say something? Like, should I confront them about this and be, the confrontational, responsible person that I am? But I decided, that isn't necessarily my kuleana. But yeah, so that's just sadly an example that I have personally experienced.
I realized you asked about, in addition to, how the land itself, rubbish and stuff that might happen, the perception of observatories kind of sitting there and rotting.
Yes, please.
And so, yeah, even though I don't work at the observatories, I do use the facilities for research. And the only telescope that I know of that had technical difficulties was our own educational telescopes. It wasn't something that was, like a bus old car that you left there to rot. It had problems with its gears. It was not working the way it should. Work was being done to replace the observatory, and that's the most extreme example I've seen for something that was sitting inactive.
But otherwise, are I've heard this before, but I've never discussed it on a panel. The telescopes that are slated for decommissioning, are those currently producing data?
So the Hilo telescope, no, right? So still, at this point, as soon as things got decided that things are going to get decommissioned, we cannot put our new observatory there. So that thing is not able to produce data. But everything else, yeah.
Yeah, jump back in.
Yeah. So sorry.
We really want to hear from you two anyway. The rest of these guys old news already.
So sorry, just another experience that I've personally had was I was actually invited to spend a day with the Office of Mauna Kea Management. They wanted to share with me really what they're up against with managing the mountain. And I don't know if you and the audience have been up to the visitor center, but it's a really small visitor center. There's not much parking, if any parking, and there are so many people there to see this magnificent mountain. And the Office of Mauna Kea Management is not nearly provided anything close to the amount of resources that they need. And so, personally having the chance to speak with them and ask them directed questions about certain aspects of their work made me realize that these people really go up and beyond to take care of the mountain with what little that they are given to do so.
My understanding is TMT is going to be paying $800,000 to assist directly to the Office of Mauna Kea Management. Have you studied that? Is that going to help?
Yeah.
Oh, Tyler, go for it.
I don't believe it's directly to the Office of Mauna Kea Management. I think it's Mauna Kea Stewardship in general, which encompasses Office of Mauna Kea Management. But I think it's, yeah.
Will it help?
remember Greg Chun told us the number that's being spent on the stewardship right now. Was it $4 million? Yeah. Oh, it was about $4 million. So Greg Chun, who's currently the director of Mauna Kea Stewardship, when we had a meeting with him, he said that currently the amount of resources they have is about $4 million. That's how much they spend. Now the $800,000 is not mean like, oh, we're going to keep it at $4 million, but they're helping. It's supposed to be another $800,000 on top of that. So I don't know, what is that? Almost like 20%? 20%. So yeah, it would be a 20% increase in the available funds for the stewardship.
Sorry, just gonna chime in a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, from that previous experience that I had, there needs to be really an entire restructuring of the aspect of having a visitor center on the mountain. Expanding the current visitor center right now is not an option because it's in a conservation district, is what my understanding is. And so that's why this issue is running much deeper than just saying, make the visitor center bigger, expand the parking lot. We really do need to restructure and really aim to find a way that we can accommodate people coming to the mountain from all over the world, as well as locally, to experience the Mauna, but also in a way that will keep everyone safe and keep the Aina pristine as much as possible.
Makana?
So on the topic, real quick, just about, telescope and being mindful of their, opala and whatnot. Tyler and I were given the opportunity to actually go up to the summit August, September-ish, and we actually got to go into a couple of the telescopes. One of them was the Canada-France Hawaii telescope, CFHT. And, well, first off, I'm not an engineer. I don't work up there. First, I'm a theorist. So for those who know the story, I'm on the other side. So, but going up there and seeing it was grand and beautiful. But, hearing the discussions from, other people saying do the telescopes produce this kind of waste? Is it this endangering to the environment, et cetera, et cetera? We asked them that, and they said, come. And they showed us from, the basement of CFHT all the way to the top where that shoulder joint gear is. And they showed us if something spills, if something breaks, if we drop something, it's marked down. We clean it up. It comes here. They showed us exactly how they clean everything. It's pristine. They do not let a spilled or an oil leak go undocumented in that facility. So these guys do their best to make sure that it's well kept, that nothing is going to harm the Mauna. Right? This is not going to harm the Aina itself. And if something does go out of whack, if something does happen, they document it, they contain it, and they deal with it immediately. And that's just our experience, our observations, and our interactions with the crew up at CFHT. They show that they really gave it them. And, a lot of them are local guys. Well, I think most of the guys we met up there are from, Waimea and whatnot. And they told us, we don't want anything from this telescope, polluting our lands. We don't want it to affect the land that we live off of. Why would we want that? They do their best. So, I just wanted to add that since we're on the topic of, telescopes and cleaning up after themselves.
Can I add to that, Makana?
Yeah.
We also have to remember, this is kind of an isolated place. It's not like if you spill something, you can just go down the road and pick up another, thing of gasoline or something, right? If you spill something, then that means you're not running for the night, or something's gonna be delayed. And so people are also very careful because you are isolated. You cannot just get more of what you need. And so if something goes wrong, it's documented. You gotta run a tight ship, essentially. And so a part of that is cleanliness and making sure you avoid such mistakes.
I want to switch it up a little bit, unless you wanted to jump in on there, Jim.
Sam, I just wanted to note that after 11 years of litigation, one of the issues that was raised time and time again by the petitioners seeking a contested case at the Board of Land and Natural Resources level, and then back up on appeal, was the possible contamination of the mountain and the aquifer below the mountain. And as it turns out, in the hearings held here in Hilo, 44 days of testimony, the evidence made it clear that there was no contamination at risk for the groundwater. There was no damage to any of the historic sites. There was no harm to rare plants or animals or any release of toxic materials based upon the current management and the proposal for the TMT. So the types of arguments that we have been hearing for 10 years are the same ones we made 20 years ago, or some people were making 20 years ago. So one of the things that's exhausting from an attorney point of view is that
We love attorneys here.
at some point in time, we have to recognize that this has already been dealt with, not just as a theoretical matter, and not as a matter of opinion, as a matter of litigated fact. Now it's going up to the Supreme Court twice, and the people who are demanding due process to ensure the safety of the mountain had that day in court, and it turned out to be 44 days. So to continue to complain about that is sort of the height of hypocrisy. After having gotten what you wanted, which was the ability to show the proof and support your claim, and not being able to do so, and to continue to complain and whine about that. I'm sorry, we don't come from a people of victims and whiners. Imua, everybody here has a connection to KS. And what was Kamehameha's motto? Imua, only forward. Are you KS too? Okay, we have two renegades, Kohoa and Punho.
I'm not even going to talk about when I went to school.
Notwithstanding those issues, it is one of the things that as a Hawaiian is the kind of thing that is most disturbing. I come from a family of engineers. I have 7 engineers in my family. I am the only attorney. And so I'm very familiar with the sort of soft-spoken, methodical way engineers speak on panels like this. We don't do that as attorneys. Our job is to make the other side cry. But you have to have the evidence to support it. And once that ruling is entered, you stop crying. And you move on.
Full disclosure, I am also an attorney. I'm sorry. So just, nobody likes attorneys until you need an attorney. And then all of a sudden, they're your best friend.